So wet down the allotments today that the birds are all having a little bath along the puddles. They're there underneath the hedgerow there. Now that it's autumn and trees are becoming dormant, it's a good time to take hardwood cuttings, and my aim today is to have a look at this Mirabelle, and basically to take some cuttings about 12 inches long. You can put the hormone rotating powder right on the end of the cutting. You mustn't put it on the actual stalk, just right on the end. You wash it off the sides of the stalk and plant it in the clay soil. The beds where I had the turbo onion and the Stuttgarter have now been dug over. Some old compost has been put in, and also recently some gypsum, and I'll be adding some lime as well to the soil, and it's been forked in and dug in for the winter. This particular plot has also had some comfrey chopped up and added as well, because the tap roots have trace minerals in and will be left over winter. It's now November, but these red discovery apples, which pollinated quite late on, much later than their sister tree, which is a Bramley, are still completely viable on the tree. But up here in the Midlands you've got at least 2 weeks behind, so you've got to add on 2 weeks to the end of October to allow these apples to reach their full maturity. The gooseberry beds, there's different varieties of gooseberries here, Hinnamarki, but this first one is a Dutch variety, which is a large green gooseberry. Going to wait until I can see exactly what job there is to do, because I've got a whole line of these gooseberries. There's some red currants along there as well, but really not successful this year, basically because I didn't get the pruning right. And having looked at ones in gardens that I've visited, got to get that classic goblet shape and get them opened up. But you can wait until much later on, until all the leaves are gone, but they will need severely pruning. The same with these summer fruiting raspberries as well. You can wait until the leaves have gone, and then you can see already, I can tell looking at some of these canes which ones are the oldest ones, and the idea is to thin them out and make sure that you've got enough light. The idea with the raspberries is to cut out older shoots because they really stop fruiting, and the younger ones that you want to keep, they'll still need some thinning out, but they can be trained. So basically I could get a line along here, some cord, some people use wire I know, and then train them. That way you've got more control over it, but you certainly need a good air. The kale is still doing well here, so I didn't plant too much of it, but it's enough to keep me going. Some of my apple trees had these little marks on them, and when I looked it up I found it's called pitting and can be due to a calcium deficiency. So I need to be going around again. I'm going to put some gypsum around the roots, and with trees, particularly fruit trees on allotments, these are on a dwarf rootstock, because you can see there's the graft. You're going to need to put some gypsum around in a circle. I do dig round them. That allows the water to get in and also stops weeds. And another good idea I looked up, I saw this from a foreign website, is to plant garlic around them. So I'm going to put lots of garlic around each one. Doesn't do any harm and certainly helps as a more of an ant repellent. The pruning can be left on the apple trees till later in winter when they're in bud. And the idea with that is obviously to open up the canopy, even on dwarf rootstock, and make sure you've got outward facing places where you are going to produce fruiting bud. I have a number of cherry trees, Stella and Morello and sour cherry. With cherry trees I found out the idea is to really cut back this year's growth. The reason being is you only get cherries on older wood, so you can cut down the current year's growth even to one bud on a stalk. So on a stalk like this, you can go right back to about there, even more, because you're only going to get fruit on. There you are, you see something older. That's the sort of branch that might produce some cherries. My cherry trees were heavily attacked by wood pigeons. Looking around my neighbours' plots, I've seen quite a few people have put nets on their cherries, and I've got two cherry trees here. Had a bit of a problem also with sap on them, which seeps. So basically that's going to be treated. I'll probably use treatments such as bicarb against canker and things like that. As you can see, cherry trees are quite a knotty wood, and it tends to be prone to weep sap. You can see at the joints there, where a branch comes off there, there's some sap there, so that'll need some treatment. I'll probably even try garlic as well. That worked well on other trees. Still got some bolottis left, and these are my second lot. Really surprised, and they seem to have survived okay. Incredibly smoky day yesterday. I've come down now to breathe in some fresh air because the place is now completely, everyone's gone bonfire crazy down here. I don't know what it is with people, but tell people you can burn bonfires, and they do. Unbelievable amounts of smoke, but the air's clear now only because it's raining. Fruit have been incredibly successful. They're getting a bit woody now. Last night I had 2 of them in the kitchen basically, and slow cooking them for well, around about 2 hours on low gas, and that's the best way I find of doing them, of cooking them. And of course they can be used in a lot of cake recipes, so I have successfully used them in cake recipes. And leave these beds in. I've got about 4 or 5 of these beetroot beds. They're Pablo variety. Apple tree, which is a Cox's pippin, has been very successful this year, and although very small, I actually pruned it quite heavily when I put it in. I transplanted it from my garden. It's one of the ones that did work, and showing you that they don't have to be very high or very tall on an allotment. It's only half the height of me. Is a greenwood Mirabelle cutting that I took. There's one which leans over my plot. It's been heavily pruned back, and basically these were bits that landed on my plot. Basically just put hormone rooting powder on the end of it, cut it clean, and putting it in the deep clay soil. Apparently sometimes they can take. The idea is I put dozens and dozens in, and maybe a couple will take. A Mirabelle, as you know, is kind of like a plum. Not that common in the UK, but in France much more so, where they make like a sort of a brandy out of it. These are some of my soft fruits. Raspberries didn't do very well this year. The reason being, I think, is this whole area was too infested with various weeds such as garlic mustard and also brambles. So I'm ripping the brambles out. They don't seem to have much of a helpful effect. I like leaving some at the bottom for wildlife to hide in, to hide from the ever-present allotment moggies that stalk the rats around on compost heaps. There's another cherry tree. This cherry tree was grown by seed by me, and I'm going to keep this one nice and short at the top, and maybe even remove one of the side branches, so I've just got the 2. The soft fruits, I'm hoping to do a lot better next year. I'm not going to over fertilise them, but I'm going to give them more light and more space and prune them back. The apple tree has done extremely well. It's an eater, not fantastic flavour, but every time I come down and have a nice cup of tea in my thermal mug, basically this is handy to come to and get yourself a nice little apple. Stringy beans, that's my last lot. Just leaving them there. They've dried off and now they're getting rained on. That's my last lot of stringy beans. I've dug the whole lot up on my other patch, and that's it for them, and dug the ground in and added some gypsum. Pops, well, they've been very successful. I got more mini pops on the plants than I thought, and that looks like the beginnings of one. I don't know whether that will make it actually, but this year, first of all, I thought I'd only get 4 or 5 off each plant, but it looks like you get a lot more. You can get even 8 to 10 mini pops. So I would recommend growing them if you've not grown them before. I ordered mine from Wilko's. They never had them in the shop. My Wilko's doesn't seem to have anything. You have to order everything online, etc. And I've just laid these ones down, are the ones that I've dug up. And the mini pops, of course, are wind pollinated, and they're grown in a line. I didn't have any major problems. I think I only got 1 or 2 hybrids where someone's neighbouring pollen got across and cross-pollinated. They were still edible. This is a pear on a dwarf rootstock. I had a nice crop off this one, and I've sprayed it with milk. And basically that's the idea of fighting the pear rust. You'll find that that's endemic now in the UK. I'm happy with the pruning of this one. I'm keeping it simple. Triple grafted pear tree, Dwayne de Camise, and it's a Bon Chrétien and a Burr Hardy, cropped heavily this year. It's only a little thing, but my God, does it pack a punch. I had to spray it a lot, again with milk. I use garlic and milk, bicarb as well, because you can see that fruit trees are prone to this fungal sort of growth on them. However, that didn't stop it from cropping heavily. Kale, which I planted in between the mini pops, has been brilliant. Garden lime is essential also to be used with gypsum, and you need to have gloves. I've got these disposable gloves that I use for it when I apply it around the soil. Just sprinkle it around. You only use like half a handful for about. This is the agricultural gypsum that I use, and you get 25 kilogram bags. I keep my cuttings in a bucket of water first, as soon as I get home, straight into the water, so that the vascular bundles, as xylem and phloem, are still operational. Sometimes I put a little bit of plant food into that bucket there. All helps. And then you can get along. You're supposed to actually sterilise whatever you cut the wood with. If it's very hard wood, I just use my actual wood clippers. Milk's a good idea actually for wiping the blades. Apparently that's antibacterial and antifungal, so that way you're not going to spread disease while you take your little cuttings off these. This is the cut shoot here, and you can see I've cut it at the end there, and this is alive, and this is a nice thin piece which is thinner than normal pencil size. So the idea is get some hormone rooting powder which is there, okay, and you get your cut shoot end here, you dip into the hormone rooting powder. Now what I'm going to have to do is, and this is the point I made, is to wipe off any powder on the actual stalk on the outside. That's what I'm doing with my thumb there, you see. You don't want any powder left on the actual stalk, or you just want powder on the very end like that. That's perfect, because apparently the hormone rooting powder on the sides actually inhibits rooting. So I've wiped as much of that as I can off. You could use a tissue if you like. Okay, then this little stalk here is ready to go straight into compost and join the others I've got on this compost. You can, as soon as the frost comes, I'll do the same as I did with the figs with this cutting with hormone rooting powder. I will put a plastic bag over the top of the pot and leave it over winter. Sometimes they might take until well past next spring before they root. You can tell when they root because there's a resistance when you pull on the actual cutting. That means that roots are formed. The roots will form actually along the sides of this hardwood cutting. This is from a Mirabelle which has gone quite invasive and came right onto my side of the allotment, all sorts of long branches, and it was cut back by the person who had it, and loads of branches fell on my side, so I thought I'd gather some and take some cuttings and see what I can do. The idea with these cuttings is to put them so that if they're 12 inches, then at least 6 to 7 inches or more is under the ground, because that's where the little roots are going to form on the sides of the cutting. You don't just put them in shallow, you need to put them in very deep. And basically you can make an angled cut. I've done one there just above a bud at a sloping angle of 45 degrees. That lets rain run off.
That's the ideal situation, and so you've got some buds on the side. You can remove a lot of the leaves. Some of these I've kept some of the leaves on, but they will die off on Mirabelles. And the idea is, they won't all take, but in the right conditions. Some people add sand. You can put grit and sand in as well, but it needs to make sure it doesn't dry out, and then they will need covering with a plastic bag as soon as the frosts come.